Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Parenting Pathshala, a new series that has been started under the National Initiative and Integrated Resource for Child Protection, Mental Health, and Psychosocial Care, supported by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India, and located in the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, NIMHANS, Bangalore. Through this project, friends, we hope to work in the health, education, and welfare sectors with particular focus on the relationship between child protection, mental health, and psychosocial care to reach childcare institutions and service providers, Childline India Foundation, legal services authorities, judicial academies, schools, district mental health programs, tertiary care hospitals, any child, every child, in all the spaces that she occupies and inhabits, to work with service providers and stakeholders across the country in all states to really take the agenda of child protection and mental health. We completed a series in August where we spoke about child rights, child mental health, education, and a new definition of grief given this unusual time that we are in. All of you who've joined in, friends, thank you very much for this new series, Parenting Pathshala. We hope that you have been well and safe and in good cheer. It is my pleasure to introduce two very dear friends today. Indumati Rao, a founder member of community-based rehabilitation network in Bangalore, which has worked in many South Asian countries, a network that has a certificate of membership with the Rehabilitation International and a UN special consultative status. Indumati Rao has been actively contributing for more than 25 years in the planning and implementation of self-help mutual aid groups in rural and tribal areas, as well across the Asian subcontinent with children and special needs. She's been associated with the Global Partnership for Disability and Development and has been a former member of the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. Welcome, Indumati Rao. We have Mary Barua, the founder director of Action for Autism, National Center for Autism, the leading autism society in India. Mary runs a school, Open Door, the first school on the Indian subcontinent exclusively for children with autism spectrum disorders. Her organization provides various autism-specific interventions and services and works on awareness, advocacy, education, research, training, and rehabilitation with an emphasis on lifespan services. Mary is an activist and a specific needs educator and has pioneered the autism movement in India and South Asia. Again, with over 2 decades of experience in working with individuals on autism spectrum, she is the recipient of the 2015 Advocate Award from the International Society for Autism Research for creating the autism community in India and advocating for more positive attitudes towards autism globally. Today's session is entitled A Lot of Help and Even More Hope, Parenting Children with Special Needs. Before we started the session, when Indumati, Mary, and I were in brief conversation, Mary made an interesting point for parenting. No school, no degrees, no training, no accreditation. Neither for marriage. It's assumed when you marry and when you choose to have parents, if you're heterosexual, that it comes automatically. Probably not true. Let me start Parenting Pathshala, the first episode in this series, by some opening statements from Indumati first and then with Mary. How did your journey in the area of disability start before we get into core issues of parenting? And ladies and gentlemen, friends who are listening today, do feel free to put your questions on chat. We will try to take as many as possible, given the duration of this program, but it'll be wonderful to hear from you and your questions with particular emphasis on parenting children with special needs. But Indumati Rao, how did your journey start with this, and some opening thoughts on the whole experience of parenting children with special needs? Over to you, Indumati.
Let me thank you from the heart for inviting me and for giving this platform for sharing. And I also congratulate you and NIMHANS for thinking of a very unique theme of, because we always have a focus on children, which is very natural. But
Thank you.
the
Thank
focus
you.
on parents is something which we do discuss, but not enough focus is given. So it is there. So I congratulate you, Dr. Shekhar Seshadri, for initiating this. So I would like to share something which I maybe I have not shared so much on public platforms, but because I was an integral part of my work with NIMHANS, so I can share once again. I had a brother who was severely epileptic.
Mm-hmm.
So the journey started because I saw all that one should not do. It was done in my family for my brother who was severely epileptic. He stopped going to school. He started failing in exams. He had various behavioral issues. He became very aggressive. And there were so many problems with siblings, and that resulted in a chaos with the relationship with the parents.
Mm-hmm.
And we could not understand as children why my parents were partial towards him. So we all thought if we become epileptic, we get attention. So we also came to that conclusion, like how to get epilepsy. So we thought epilepsy is the passport to get attention, love, and affection and pampering.
My gosh.
This is the way siblings think. So because as a sibling, I used to think, and all my brothers and sisters, we used to think like that. So in the journey, what I saw was going from one medical man to another medical man, from one miracle faith healer to another faith healer, trying out everything from allopathy, homeopathy, in Kannada we say kitapathy. So everything possible to get a quick cure for epilepsy, which never worked. So of course, I lost my brother about 20 years ago in the entire process, but I have seen the pain and agony of my parents.
Right.
As siblings, I have seen the confusion and are not able to understand what is going on. So we could not really understand when he was aggressive, why he hated us at times, why he was affectionate some other times. So we could not understand his emotions. So this really made me to think of doing something for parents.
Right.
So my entire work started with with Dr. H.S. Narayan, who started working with parents in NIMHANS.
Right.
So we looked at whatever the school started refusing admission to children with profound mental retardation in Bangalore. So then we started a movement like whatever the school can do, home can do better.
Right.
So that is how we started the self-help mutual aid support groups, transferring all the technology to parents and organizing them, and so that they learn without depending on special schools. So I started with a very anti-special school approach in the beginning, because the special school said unless children are toilet trained, they will not take them. It is like, a catch-20 situation. Children with very profound brain damage, it takes in fact, entire education starts with toilet training.
Right.
They almost like one of the end goals. So demanding for toilet training is something like closing doors. So that is how we said, okay, forget about the special schools. Let us learn everything. So this is how I started. I started a project called Seva in Action in the villages with the support of UNICEF. So slowly, I felt the need is more in the rural areas. So I switched over my entire focus to working in the rural areas. Thank you.
What a remarkable story. Mary, take us through your story and the beginnings of your work and your advocacy in the area of autism.
So, I have a son, of course, who has autism, who turned 40 this year. And he's 40 years old. He's a middle-aged man, actually, now. He is what you call Canner's autism. That's the way people describe people who have, higher support needs. And the thing is that when he received it, for a long time, of course, he did not receive a diagnosis because, as happens with autism, you look very typical. So, and doctors 40 years ago really did not know about much about autism. Very few doctors did. So it took me a long time to get a diagnosis. And I think one of the things that stayed with me was this absolute lack of any information. Because, you know, that's what really bothered me. I wanted to know what I could do to help him. When I eventually got the at age 5, my entire aim was I want to do something that that will help him, that will help him learn, help him be happy. Because he was distressed a lot of the time. He had a lot of what I call tantrums and stuff like that. And I never knew how to help him.
Right.
So this absolute lack of information, there were no books available. I visited every library, every bookstore. There was nothing in India. The first book on autism I got from England, from Lorna Wing's Guide for Parents. And that took 1 month to come because those were the days when there was no direct dial, there was no Gmail, internet, etc. So once I started off, I realized one of the things that occurred to me was that there was no need for parents to go through this kind of lack of information and not knowing what to do. That for me was the biggest thing, that I just didn't know how I could help him. I wanted to change that. And that is what drove me to start what I did, that I wanted parents to feel there is something I can do. It's not a hopeless situation. There is change that can happen. That is really what drove me. But of course, I must add that after I had been doing this for a few years, a shift happened where I felt I wanted to help people with autism more than I wanted to help the parents. Because I realized that while as parents, we have a really difficult life because society does not understand our children, we don't know how to help them, there's not enough information. But at least we live in a society which is neurotypical like us, and they understand us. Whereas my son and people like him live in a world where nobody really understands them. And their life, if my life is tough to the power of n, my son's life is tough to the power of n to the power of 10. And that's what people with. So that's how the shift happened. And now our focus really is people with autism rather than their parents. But of course we help them also, because if you don't help parents, you can't help the children.
Right.
So we focus a lot on empowering parents, giving them training, giving them the tools to help their children. But our primary group now is really people with autism.
Right. Thank you very much for those remarkable stories. And between navigating through the mass of misinformation, as Indumati pointed out, to the lack of information that Mary has spoken about, brings us to a very practical point as we go forward in today's session, which is, let's speak about young children first and then move towards older children. In your experience, what have been some of the practical aspects of parenting young children, experiences, aspects, challenges, bottlenecks, nice things and wonderful things as well that might have happened? Indu, would you like to start first by sharing with us some of the practical aspects of parenting young children with disability?
I would say that parents, what happens is parents need not try to be extraordinary. They just, they try to be extraordinary. What happens is they forget their own joy, their own health, their own, say, small, things which would relax them. I have seen parents who have never gone out for a movie theater, who have never gone out of, out of the house, who have never traveled, and they say that it is all for the sake of the child. Okay, so this is something, in my experience, I feel it is so important for parents to be happy first, so that children can be happy. And that is something which is very important. They must take care of their physical health, which is very important, because caregivers' problems, whether it's a backache or stress related issues, is mounting up, which we are seeing. So it is so important for parents to take their physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being as a top priority. I would suggest to parents, like in the aeroplane, first you when there is a crisis, first take care of yourself before
Right.
helping the neighbor. The same rule applies when we have crisis in the
So
family.
true.
It
So
is so
true.
important to take care, because I see caregivers having more problems than children with disabilities, because of they are not taking enough care. So that is one. The second aspect, Dr. Shekhar Seshadri, which I would like to say is this compatibility, the relationship between the husband and wife,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
is something which is really it is uh, it is shaken up so much. Okay, I,
Right.
as in many families, I don't see the kind of married life that should be there. Okay, so much of stress and all that, they say that it is because of this the presence of the child, and it could result in say blaming each other, or blaming one partner, and one partner moving out to, I mean, away from families, sometimes even moving out to stay away from families, which I'm sorry, which I see more in fathers than mothers, spending more time in the club or with friends than spending at home. All this it ruins their own health. Okay, which is not good for them, as I would say that in a very unhappy family, children also suffer. That is what I usually see. So parents, disability comes next. So
Right.
the child
Right.
is the child first. So the child needs everything, irrespective of the disability, irrespective of the labels, because I don't believe in labels. So first treat them with like any other children, and first take care of yourself. We should not be
Right.
heroes. It is perfectly all right to be little imperfect. That is what I keep saying to parents. It is perfectly all right. Don't try to be perfect. Also,
What a remarkable preamble, for parenting children with special needs. There is, of course, what you will do for the children in terms of taking them to professionals, in terms of trying to get them special educational facilities, in terms of what you will do for all the home-based activities and programs, and seeking other forms of enablement and benefits. All of that is there. All of that is true. All of that is legitimate. All of that is important. But all of that is predicated on a fundamental principle, as Indumati Rao points out, of the extent to which you take care of your own health and identity, and the fact that you are not defining your identity only on the basis of the parenting that you do for your special needs child. You perhaps have other children and you're a parent to other children. You are a spouse, you're a daughter, you're a son, you're a sister, you're a brother. And of course, your role as the parent of the special needs child may define a significant part of what you are, but should it define your whole? And what does that do to the kind of dynamics that Indu points out is a very remarkable preamble to keep in mind. Mary, what are your thoughts on practical aspects of parenting young children in terms of both your personal experience and the vast body of experience that you have had in assisting families similarly placed?
So, all the points that Indumati made, I think they're so important and so true across the board. Of course, I also believe that a lot of the marriages, they get stronger and some of them break up. And I think when the marriage breaks up, I think the cracks were already there. This just
Right.
acts as a trigger and, it just makes it happen. But having said that, I think in the area of autism, one of the big things that happen when you have a small child with autism, because when they're smaller, they look more typical.
Right.
No, what I mean is that, when the kid with autism is older, when there's a 17-year-old flapping his hands, it doesn't look that typical or normal, as people would like to say. But if there is a 3-year-old running around flapping their hands, it looks very typical. So then what happens? I mean, the commonest thing that I see is parents, and this seems to have become even more in recent times because there are all the quacks online selling therapies. So there's this enormous desire in parents to make the kid normal. So this is one of the biggest things that I see that has really grown rather than reduced in recent times. And I'm a part of a lot of these WhatsApp groups. People keep adding me. And it's, in many ways, it's really heartbreaking to see the kind of stuff that parents are doing. Exactly what Indumati said, once they're killing themselves from morning to night trying to give therapy. But a lot of the therapy is completely useless stuff that is not going to help them. The other thing is that the entire focus is on teaching them academics, ramming academics down their throat, when here is a child who is not even communicating, right? So either forcing them to speak and not understanding that the child, even if the child does not speak, you can work on communication, trying to get them to learn 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D, etc. When there is a child who's still confused about the world and the parent is spending their entire time trying to make them do things that the child is not ready for. Right. So a child who is not ready for step A is being forced to do step C. So that's the kind of stuff that I see. But then I also see the other side, where there are parents who do completely practical parenting, who have just got it, who know that if I don't take a break, I can't help my child. What Indumati said, that if parents are not happy, how will they teach their child to be happy? Right? So there are parents who also get that. I mean, they didn't go to any school to learn that. They just got it. And then there are parents on the other side who really are just pushing and pushing and pushing their 3 and 4-year-olds, making them from morning to evening, either they're doing stem cell therapy or giving them camel milk or doing some other damn protocol. It's like a crazy thing as far as the autism sector is concerned. And as far as families with kids with autism in rural areas are concerned, the reality is most don't even get a diagnosis right now. They don't. We did a couple of surveys and there is no diagnosis. They are either kept away at homes because they can walk around, they're seen as somebody, which is a good thing actually, because they're able to get up and stand and walk. I think it's a great thing. They are given things that they can do. It's usually in towns and cities, it becomes a huge thing that the child is not going to school or not doing the stuff other kids do. Oftentimes in rural areas, I see kids who clearly have autism are engaged in life, in everyday things that they could do in the village. So there are positives and negatives with as far as parenting is concerned.
And what happens when the children are a little older, Mary? What are the kind of parenting issues that you and aspects that you see in older children?
Yeah, see, one of the things that we feel very strongly about is that if you want to really help your child, there has to be acceptance. And very often as parents, we confuse love with acceptance. I may love my child, but I may not really accept the child the way he is, right? And I may accept somebody, but I may not love that person. And that's okay. Because I think acceptance is far stronger. Because it's like saying, I would really like you a lot more if your face was square and not so round, right? And that's something you can't really change. And that is what we do to our kids. We keep telling them that, if you just change this, if you become non-autistic, I have yet to hear a parent of a child with, say, cerebral palsy say, I want my child to not have cerebral palsy, right? They don't focus on that. They focus on how to help the child. But with kids with autism, the focus is constantly on making the child non-autistic, right? So having said that, I think some of the most important things to focus on are, treating the child with respect, giving them dignity, giving them agency, because one of the things that parents don't realize that when your child is small, it's one thing. The minute your child is around age 10, age 11, approaching puberty, adolescence, does not matter if your child has autism, there will be the need to assert themselves. They will need to have agency. And you keep hearing kids with autism having a lot of behaviors in adolescence. And those behaviors are created by us. We create those behaviors because we refuse to acknowledge that they have a right to make choices. They have a right to make even choices. If I don't want to wear this shirt and I want to wear that, the parent will insist. See, with a typical kid, when you do that, when the parent says, no, you have to wear this, they will find other ways to get what they want. When I was a teenager, if I didn't want to come home for something, all of us have done it. We fib to our parents. Which kid with autism can fib? Which kid with autism knows how to get their way, right? So they lead a life of being controlled continuously. And that is the root cause of behaviors they have in adolescence. Unless there is some medical condition like anxiety disorder or maybe epilepsy and stuff like that. But other than that, it's mostly caused by us because we refuse to give them any agency, we refuse to give them control. And that is something parents have to keep in mind as the kids get older. Just because the child has autism, just because they cannot vocalize, Just because even if they have speech they cannot express, it does not mean they do not have a mind.
This is very interesting because the whole shift of parenting from young children to older children, the whole preoccupation with acceptance around diagnosis, and the seeking of miracle cures, and the kind of experience we have sometimes that we've had a couple of examples of people wanting investigations, and we said it's a developmental disorder. And we're often surprised when people say, but listen, if I don't offer my child for investigations, how will science progress? You know, we have that kind of family as well. And on the other hand, there is this business of people saying, doctor, please tell me my child does not have autism. And, you know, you may say, I may not say so, you know, I may say he has shortism, or uh, it's a label, you know, it's a diagnosis, but, you know, ultimately we have to look at. So this is something that we need, you know, to keep in mind. But this, and therefore, the whole shift, Mary, of what you said about the parenting experience not being focused on the disability, and of course you will do that, but on that child, the person, the individual, and his or her agency. Indu, your thoughts on older children and parenting and experiences, particularly in your CBR work, and any experiences in the urban rural distinctions that you have come across?
I agree with Mary when we talk about better acceptance, better opportunities in rural areas, and better realistic expectations in the rural areas. I also have seen in my CBR work in the villages where there is more acceptance of accepting a person with all their abilities or the so-called disabilities. Okay, that is one. The second thing is I want to share about, it is so important for parents to understand when they're whatever others they go through, irrespective of the factor whether they have disability or not,
Mm-hmm.
they would be going through the same emotional stages, and they will be going through all the needs, especially when it comes to the sexual needs. It is so important for them to understand, because that is one of the areas where I find the parents of adult children having tremendous problems on understanding this aspect. Like, how can this child who cannot even recognize or read and write can
Right.
have sexual needs? So I try to explain it has got nothing to do. You know, you don't have to be an Einstein to have sexual needs. So it's that we work on a different level. So that really takes a lot of time for parents to understand. So there's a lot of confusion about the adult child behavior.
Right.
The other one is treating adult children as children. In fact, even people talk about adult children, which is wrong, which is very inappropriate even by language. So they are adults, no? They are not adult children. No? So we need to really treat adults, and adults have to be, or they like to be treated with respect and dignity, not by control and monitoring. So this is something where parents need a lot of support. And the other aspect which Dr. Seshadri, I want to say that parents are getting older.
Right.
Because parents are getting older and parents are not in perfect condition in terms of their physical health or mental health or say emotional health, because I see parents having diabetes, back pain, blood pressure, all that is having a larger role where they are also disabled. The disabling process of aging and say addressing the needs of adults, it is as caregivers it is too much taxing.
Right.
It's too much taxing. So this is something which in other countries I have seen, especially in the Scandinavian countries, they have the independent living concept
Yes.
where people live say on their own. Of course there are plus points, I mean nothing comes with absolutely, but it is so important for the aging parents with adult so I mean I don't want to say okay kids because it doesn't sound very right to me. So with adult offspring it is so important for the sharing in the care, because that is one thing, like caregiving is one of the most challenging for aging parents. Okay. So because of the various factors, so we need to really take that into account and not understanding what this special needs, no? Because I don't believe in labels like autism or whatever it is. So whatever is the need of the person that is not clearly understood by the parents, and because there is no one explains to them, okay, like what exactly is that. So I think it is very need for like awareness, especially on in our close society, to discuss about sex and other aspects which is not spoken freely. So that is, I would say that as one of the important one. And the
It's a
other
very,
topics,
yeah.
yeah.
It's
And
no, it's a very, very.
I just want to add one
Sure,
point.
sure.
So there's a lot of also incest which I see in the families. Okay. So which is not seen by parents. Sometimes even when they see, they feel they cannot change it. So they cannot control it. I think it's very important for us to see that where they have same rights as others. So that any violation, we have to really ask parents to fight against it. So this is something very critical.
These are very critical issues of parenting on special and complex areas, which in a non-disability sector itself, we don't speak about much, which is the whole area of sexuality. And we've reached the halfway mark, and the audience is already, posting questions. And here's the first that I'd like to pose to both of you. If you take a child who has a global developmental delay, even in the context of autism, if it's autism with intellectual disability, some practical aspects and tips from you, guidance on children with global developmental delay, and for purposes of addressing it from a parenting experience perspective. You could assume that we are, talking about someone who is perhaps on the mild moderate spectrum, or someone who is on the more severe profound spectrum. What could be some of the practical aspects and some guidance? Just a couple of tips from you, Indu, first, and then from Mary.
I really want to say to parents, this is not rocket science. It is very, I would say it is not a Brahma Vidya. It is very simple. Okay. So all that we need to do is just help the children, okay, to learn one step at a time, okay, and plan a program and have a structure. And yes. So, and there are many things like, we have, developed the CBR portage manual, which is available in all Indian languages. We have a portage app, which is helpful to parents. So please use that, but it gives a structure, and use common sense. I feel using common sense and building up a structure and the potential, whatever the child has, we should make optimum use of the residual potential in every child.
Right.
So, whatever may be the degree of disability or intensity, but we should not waste the potential of the child. That needs a structured program.
Right. Mary?
Well, I would say, adding to what, the very important points that Indumati made, is that be aware of your child's efforts to communicate. Sometimes we miss those, and that's very, very important. And be responsive to those efforts to communicate, using your common sense, of course. And the other thing is that provide you use language that is very clear, precise, straightforward, because the child will not understand complicated language and complicated sentences, something that parents often tend to do, and tend to use language without intending to, like saying things like, "Kyun aisa kar rahe ho?" Now, "Kyun aisa kar rahe ho" is very confusing for a child who's not able to answer that question. Right. And if the child also has autism, to the child it appears like a query that he has to respond to. Right? So keeping your communication very simple, clear, precise, being responsive. Do not yell, shout, hit your child. That's the one thing I would say, because it never, ever, ever teaches a child anything. A child who's stressed and who's afraid of being hit and yelled at shuts down. That child's capacity to learn has gone down. And finally, keep the environment structured. Don't make the environment confusing. If you do certain activities, whatever it is, eating or bathing in a particular place, don't keep changing things around the house. The more structured the environment is, the more structured the activities you do with the child, daily living activities, dressing, eating. The more structured you keep it, the better your child will learn.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Indumati, you referred to portage and all the stuff that is available. There's another question that has come, in terms of some ideas about the kind of self-help books for parents who have children with special needs, parents who have children with autism, for different ages, children, adolescents, and young adults. Of course, you mentioned portage. Are there other resources that you could suggest on this program?
We have quite a lot of resources, and also in many Indian languages, as and it looks at early childhood. I mean, that is we refer to Portage as early childhood support program, which has been Indianized and ruralized. You can do most of the programs without spending any money. So that is what we have done in CBR. Like most of the materials are all available in Indian Kitchen. So please use that material, and it is available, and app is also there. But we have another program called TALK. It is training adolescents to live in the community. This is for the adolescents with say special needs. Of course, it can be used even for others. It talks about the basic skills a person should learn. So then it has which should go when a child is around 12 years, because we don't want to postpone that. So it prepares them to live in the community. So the talk is there. And there are many, say, materials that are available in the Kindle version. And also virtual videos are there for parenting. So it's a wealth of materials. Please feel free to use it. Most of our materials comes free of cost. So I request all parents to use it generously by contacting us. You can also go and Google and you can find it, but write to us. We should be very happy to help parents.
Yeah. Mary, any materials that you could suggest?
As far as autism is concerned, the net is flooded with materials.
Yeah, that's a problem as well.
That's a problem. That's what I was coming to. The point is, and also there are lots of great organizations. I mean, Action for Autism is not the only one. There's Naidisha, Umeed, Autism Society West Bengal, Bubbles in Bangalore itself, Soch in Jalandhar. There are lots of really responsible organizations with excellent websites. But unfortunately, the web is also full of really snarky organizations that are only selling what they make. Like all kinds of crazy stuff that they sell, all kinds of crazy treatment that is being sold. So it is very difficult for parents to navigate all of that. But if they write to us, we can always direct them to the best resource in their area, because there are quite a lot of good organizations in Goa, in Hyderabad, in Bangalore, in Chennai, across the country. There are not too many in the rural areas. There are a few, and we could always direct families to those. And our website carries a whole list of resources, but then we cannot take responsibility for everybody who's listed there, because people write to us and we just put them on. But if they write to us and ask us for specific organizations, we can refer them to not just organizations, to also the kind of stuff that they, for instance, in communication.
Right.
There are a lot of AACs that are available, and there are some that are available. There are expensive, good ones, but then there are free ones like Bowl and Jello and stuff like that. So we could refer parents to some of those. So that's the kind of stuff that we could do. And, as far as, we also do a lot of work in open employment and assisted living and stuff like that. So we do know a few other organizations across the country that are doing this kind of stuff. So if parents get in touch, we can again refer them to the ones that will be closest to them and most accessible.
Both these professionals here, Indumati Rao and Mary Barua, are very strong believers in networking and in the power of networking. And these are not people who work in silos. They are generous professionals who will direct you, depending on wherever you are, to an agency locally that would be able to support you, not just in terms of materials, but also in terms of, let's say, activity or, some form of parent management, and assisting you in the kind of experiences and challenges that you face. That just a couple of other things. There is a question that has come up on the concern that keeps evolving with every developmental transition of the child and adolescent. Just to let you know that we are having a special session as part of this series. In fact, it's on in the next program itself with Joe Chopra, which is going to focus only on what's me. So just hold on to that question, and you must log in to the Parenting Pathshala program and keep it going. There's also a very interesting clinical challenge of a 17-year-old with presumably with a developmental problem, with a major depressive disorder as well, refusing treatment and left home and found a couple of days later in a railway station, and the socialization is quite low. And as someone who works in a child psychiatric facility, I just wanted to share with you that uh, psychiatric illnesses or mental health problems is prevalent in people with disability to a fairly significant extent. You know, I would say maybe even 30 to 50%. Anxiety, uh, depression, and
Exactly.
other forms of, and it's not easily recognized, and this is called as the diagnostic overshadowing or the diagnostic masking, because is the behavior part of the developmental problem itself, or is it an independent issue? And often they're undiagnosed and untreated, and therefore to be aware of some sudden change. There was already a developmental problem, but you know, in the last 4 weeks there has been a new and a very unusual change. You know, these are called as red flags, so that early treatment is started for individuals who have what we call as comorbid mental health conditions. Dr. Indumati, there's a question specifically for you. What sort of community framework do you think is feasible in a country like India for supporting living to foster independent living? I mean, it's not strictly a parenting question, but you know, you did refer to examples in Scandinavian countries of in independent living and so on. So, in a country like India, if you could respond to this as some kind of a counterpoint to the whole issue of parenting um, in children with special needs, particularly when they become adults. Your thoughts, Dr. Rao?
Yeah. We have even suggested to the Ministry of Social Justice on say supporting the supported living. So the
Right.
supported living concept is something which is a combination of independent living and our concept of self-help groups for grown-up persons with disabilities, where they can stay together, sharing in
Right.
doing things together, and also sharing the management of the house. And this, especially in the rural areas, I was looking at like 3 to 5 persons with, say, disabilities, no adults, they can live together partially or fully. That is another model where they need not stay fully away from the house, but staying in a house where managing on their own for a few days in a week, also linking with the livelihood, say, activities, because just staying at home without activities can lead to a lot of problems. So it is so important to see that they work at least for about 6 hours per day. That is what
Mhm.
I say. Whatever may be the nature of work, 6 hours, and having a routine, it is very important. And that kind of support groups, neighborhood groups, is very important. So we have been asking the panchayat to set up such services with the 5% of development budget that is there in the RPD Act, and many governments have say circulars to spend that money, including the government of Karnataka. So it is so important to create these neighborhood groups, and that will also answer some of the questions what you raised, like what happens when parents are no more.
Right.
This is a very challenging question which bothers every parent. So this mutual support groups is very important, and we have such examples in Mysore, Sasahaya Samuchaya, where we encourage parents from the Chintamani rural areas to set up groups in Mysore. So this is something which has been very good when parents start these support groups and allow children, their adult children, to manage. So this is the model which we are promoting within the framework of community-based rehabilitation, and also taking into the financial issues in our country. Like we cannot get the kind of money a Scandinavian government would give. So we have to really make it self-sustainable. So this is possible to set up these neighborhoods groups with support. No, these support groups are
Right.
very important. Thank you.
It's interesting how these kind of systemic issues and questions on the one hand, and very individual issues and individual experiences on the other hand, frame the whole range of parenting contexts for children with special needs. This is a question for you, Mary, which has come. Um, how do you increase socialization in an autistic girl who's 7 years old? If you could share your advice on that. And there's a related issue here. Um, how do you sort of deal with the constant anxiety and stress of parent or parents who anticipate unpredictable, socially odd or inappropriate behaviors and talk of a child, especially if from 7-year old she enters teenage and the consequent teasing and humiliation by others. And there are a lot of other questions pertaining to sexuality which Indu had raised, and I'll come to that in a bit. But Mary, 7 years old, autism, socialization is
So,
poor, and then she becomes a teenager. And how do you negotiate this journey as a parent?
right. So, see, to increase socialization, one of the first things would have to be that the child has to experience the world as a pleasant place.
Mm-hmm.
If the world is not a pleasant place, why would I want to come out and, come out of my shell and have anything to do with it, right? So if I want to help the child increase socialization, I have to understand what are the things that the child finds pleasurable, what are the things that the child likes, enjoys engaging in, what are their strengths, right? That's the first place that I start with. And then I have to create activities and games, just interaction, positive interactions with the child through the day. If we can, with the help of other young people around, if we don't have other young people around, I know I didn't have any young people around, to be honest. I have an only son, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you try and create positive experiences so that the child, see, for most kids with autism, they're pretty happy in their own little world, doing their own stuff, right? If you want them to come out and engage with the world, you have to make the world seem a pleasant place. That is where you start from. And the other thing, I did not quite get that about the teenager thing, but I got something about,
No, it's
people judging
yeah, it's about
behavior,
it's about
stuff like that.
yeah, as they go into their teenage, the kind of anxiety that parents have that this child with autism or this child with disability may manifest socially odd or inappropriate behaviors, and then be the
Okay.
target of teasing or humiliation and bullying.
Okay, for two things there. One, I would say, don't worry about what's going to happen 10 years down the line. Focus on what you want to do now. Take one step at a time. Because this is one of the difficulties that happens. I'm thinking of the next 100 steps. Let's just focus on the 7-year-old, try and help her to learn the best I can, not worry about what may or may not happen when she's 70. That's one, right? Because you don't really know what will happen. Maybe when she's 17, she'll be managing the social areas so well that you don't have to worry. That could also happen. The other thing is that there will always be people who will look, who will stare, who will pass comments. Even if you do not have autism, people will do that. They do it to people who are also typical. The most important thing is how do I feel about my child's behavior? How do I feel about odd behaviors? If I am comfortable about the odd behaviors, when I'm out with my child, I give that message to the world. If I'm uncomfortable about the odd behaviors, I'm telling the world what she does is really weird. And this is something I'm saying from lived experience of hundreds of parents. They have all realized that if I give the message that I'm so embarrassed by this child's behavior, everybody around you will see that as embarrassing. But if you are comfortable, you'd be amazed your entire locality will change. And you start with your street, you start with the locality, then you move to other places. That is how things have changed in the country, because there were parents who decided, I'm not going to get embarrassed about my child's behavior. Nobody gets embarrassed about a kid with cerebral palsy who has spasticity. Yet, if my child has autism and is flapping, I'm embarrassed. Why?
Well, since we are on the subject of parental response and what the word embarrassment that has been used in understandable contexts, that we come to the last phase of today's session, which is on the whole issue of sexuality and sexuality education, and some practical parenting tips on imparting sexuality education, looking after sexual needs, looking after protection needs, which Indumati alluded to earlier in the presentation. Just a mild digression here. There is a question on online classes and the issue of disability. And I would urge you to listen to our August talks with Padma Sarangapani, where we've spoken about the whole, online classes, particularly because of COVID. So please do listen to that show, which is there on YouTube. But Indumati, first to you on the whole sexuality issue before we close the session. How do we deal with sexual needs, sexuality education, protection, the whole world? What has been your experience of working with parents and parenting experiences and challenges? And then I'll have Mary respond to it as well. Indu?
I just request parents to relax. So it's so important if you relax, because this is a stage where every child would go through, and nothing will happen. So there is no need for you to think of overprotection. So this, but taking care is very important. I'm not saying that you can just let it loose for say very unpleasant consequences. That is important, but worrying too much about this is not good. But explaining to children about sexuality without adding the drama to it, and just say in the plain facts what it is, and to take care of themselves, it will solve your problem. It is so simple, but you just need to explain to them without being non-judgmental, because that is very important. Don't add your right and wrong, in appropriate, inappropriate, because we are not judges. No, we are not passing any judgment. So we don't have to take that stand at all. But just be very natural and explain to them it is like any other aspect of the body. Okay. Well, I would say that it is as simple. I mean, it may sound a little bit funny, like managing your cold. So you have to say in a very simple way, like what it is and how to manage. Okay. And the more you add these judgmental, say, approach to sexuality, you will entirely mess up the issue. So that is something very important. So overprotection is what I see, especially with girls with special needs. They are locked up and they are not allowed to move out. That is not correct at all, because if something happens, that is not happening because of her, but because of others in the society. So it is so important to work on the others in the society. I'm giving an example from say, if you are in a village, just see that everyone knows the child, okay? Everybody knows your daughter, and they all feel responsible towards her rather than protecting her. So that is where the community-based rehabilitation plays a very big role, where we are changing the people around them, not trying to change the person with special needs. There is really no need for them to change. It is others who should change. So that is what CBR adds value to how we live in a cultured, civilized society.
Right. Your thoughts, Mary?
Everything that Indumati said. And of course, along with that, we see, because we tend to see people with disabilities as asexual, right? And one of the things we have to help parents see that sexual needs is something everybody has. You had, and your child does. It's not what your child the sexual need that your child has is not something bizarre and weird. It's a common human need. And the other thing we do is we help them see that you can teach the child to take care of the sexual needs if you structure it clearly, so that they know that this is my private time. They know which are private spaces. We teach them what are the private parts, private spaces, private time, private places, right? All of that. And we also do something about teaching children in a very visual way about circles of relationships so that they can take care of themselves. And we make it very, very visual so they know who are the people that they can allow to touch them physically, who are the people that they're going to keep a distance from, who are the people that they have to keep a longer distance from and not speak to at all, but doing it in a very, very clear visual manner. And just help, and like Indumati said, tell parents that this is a part of life and just help your child to learn, and that's it.
In all that we have discussed today, when we come back to a basic philosophical premise of being a parent of a child with special needs, I will read a statement that has been put on chat and I will ask both of you for a quick response. And the statement is this: how to help parents who have followed norms of performing only, not focusing on being part of the self all through their life before becoming the parent of a child with special needs. Your response, Indumati?
Yeah, I would say, I request parents, please don't waste your life. Okay. You are a parent is only one role. Okay. So please, please make sure that you enjoy life and you do everything what you should do as individuals. And your identity as parent is only one dimension. So there is really no need for us to go out of our way, stretch beyond our limits, sacrifice everything to do what? To become the so-called ideal parent. I would say that there are no ideal parents on this earth. So don't worry to be perfect. Don't try to be ideal. Just be natural. Okay, flow with the current and enjoy life. And I have seen many parents who really enjoy parenting, and that is very important, whether you have a child with special needs or diverse needs or different needs or no needs. Okay, just enjoy, because they have only one childhood, and you can see only enjoy one childhood. So ignore disability. Okay, see the childhood in children, and don't focus so much on disability. It is not worth it. It is
Mary?
not worth it in the long run.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Your thoughts, Mary?
I don't need to add much to what Indumati said. She said it all. Just want to say that when they learn to enjoy themselves, they learn to enjoy their child. And that is what is important.
Indumati Rao and Mary Barua, thank you very much for joining us today, and the vast experience that both of you have had in the field in terms of your concerns in the field that you work in and the remarkable work that you have done in your illustrious careers. Thank you for opening Parenting Pathshala. It was an honor and a privilege to have you as our esteemed guests on this show. Friends, on behalf of the National Initiative and Integrated Resource for Child Protection, Mental Health and Psychosocial Care, supported by the Ministry of Women and Child Development, Government of India, and located in NIMHANS, Bangalore. Thank you very much for joining us and for participating. Be sure to join us in the remaining 9 sessions of Parenting Pathshala. In the meantime, be safe, be in good cheer, and let me end by a quote from Mark Twain, who said, "My mother had a great deal of trouble with me, but I think she enjoyed it."
Well said. Thank you.
And thank you and good night. Be safe.